Alright, so welcome back everybody to my next deck profile, and this is again going to be on Branded Bestial or Branded Despia. I'm probably going to title this video after Branded Despia. But with that said, there have been some major changes done to this deck. So this deck is just not what it was before. This deck has changed so much because of the new wave of support from Cyberstorm Access, and I have to say that I am much happier with how the deck is doing now versus how it was doing before, even if I am playing it differently. I think that it revitalized my love for this deck, if anything, so I'm very happy to bring this deck profile, I almost said review, force of habit, deck profile to you all, as this is, I think, the best deck profile that I have made so far. So here I've got the main deck, I've got the extra and the side deck. So I'm going to talk about these in order. So let's dive right in. Alright, so as usual, we're going to begin with the main deck, and I've actually decided to drop the card count. So before I was running 45 cards, now I'm running 41 cards. So we are as close to 40 as we're possibly going to get, and this is because of a couple of choices that I have made here. And I'm going to go over everything so that this video is as informative to you all as possible, so that this can help inform your own decisions when deck building. So first things first, I'm actually going to run 2 Guiding Quem, the Virtuous, and the reason for this is because I think that this card really changed the game, or how this deck plays. This deck helps you play around Ash. If anything, it helps you do so many things, and it helps you get around so many things as well. And a lot of people don't really know how to respond to Quem. So her effect essentially is that when she's normal or special summoned, you can just send one Fallen of Albaz or one monster that mentions it from your deck to the graveyard, which is usually going to be Blazing Cartesia, or sometimes I send Albion in case I want to activate his own effect. But with that said, she also has another effect on the field that when a monster is sent from the extra deck to the graveyard while she's on the field, you can special summon one Fallen of Albaz or one monster that mentions it from the graveyard. So she replaces ad libitum essentially, because if you sent Mirror Jade to the graveyard that same turn, Mirror Jade mentions Fallen of Albaz in the name, so you can just special summon Mirror Jade again and then get the banishing effect again, which is insane. So this card does replace the rest of the Despia engine for me, minus one card obviously that just will not be coming out, since that is what defines Despia for the most part. But this card has been so powerful. It's so easy to search with Branded Opening, so easy to search with Mercurier, and so easy to search with Nadir Servant as well, that it's just very difficult to want to look past it. Another reason why I run 2 is obviously going to be because of Kashtira, because in case one of my copies gets banished, I want to make sure that I have at least one more copy in my deck. And there have been actually quite a few times where I end up using both in one game. So I think that having both has been really helpful to my strategy. So I will continue to play 2 for the foreseeable future. Now, next up, we've got double Blazing Cartesia over here. So when it comes to Cartesia, we are still looking at such a powerful card. And because both of these are going to be tuners, level 4 tuners, that's actually going to come up quite a bit here, because we are playing a synchro engine, and not just a tiny one with Luluwa Lilith, but we're playing a couple of other ones too to really maximize on that. So Blazing Cartesia is going to be great for synchro summoning, but very much for fusion summoning as well, because you want to use her for bringing out Grand Guignol and other cards like that that will help you get your combo started. I feel like this deck isn't really as dependent on branded fusion as it was before, so I'm honestly very happy with that, because now we're able to still build boards even if we get ashed. It's not really a turn ender anymore. Then next, we have got triple Fallen of Albaz. I still think that 3 is going to be the correct number. I wouldn't run any less than this. There have been many debates of whether or not 2 or 3 is better. I personally believe that 3 is just the better way to go about it. I think that with 3, there's just so many ways to recycle Fallen of Albaz, and it's unlikely that you will run out of Fallen of Albaz. And if anything, you might just hit your limit with 3, so using 3 in one game. So this is what I would run. I have never dropped it, and I don't think I ever will. Then we've got triple Aluber, the Jester of Despia. So this card, this is going to be the only other Despia monster that I run in this deck, because I believe that this is really the only one that you need. I do not run Dramaturge anymore, and I do not run Tragedy. I just found that if anything, they ended up being bricks in this version of the deck. So I decided that I wasn't going to run them, and since in this deck we're not going for double Masquerade lines anymore either, I figured that it wasn't really worth it to run them anyway. There wasn't really an excuse to run Dramaturge anymore, or even Tragedy for that matter, so I decided to just cut it down to a Looper, and this is what I prefer. Plus, Guiding Quem does behave as our other Despia monster anyway, so that's still going to be a great way to go. Now for the next engine, we got the Bestial, so we got double Lubellion. Since we are running Synchros in this deck, we are going to run a slightly bigger Bestial engine than what we're used to seeing. I think that 2 Lubellions is really the way to go, because you can use him to search, you can also use him in different ways, such as to summon him, so send that Albion that you just summoned to the graveyard and then bring him out to bring out one of your continuous spells. So this card is great, honestly. I still really like it at 2. Then we've got 1 Bestial Magnamut. This is going to be primarily for searching. 1 Bestial Saronir, which is going to be the one that I aim for the most, because that way I get to send 1 Branded Speller Trap to the graveyard. I almost never send a Bestial with this effect. It usually ends up being a Branded Speller Trap. So it will either be Retribution or one of the other ones, just depending on how the game state is. Then we got 1 Bestial Druisworm. This is one of the best generic forms of removal, if any, so I really like Druisworm, if anything, so this is going to be my Bestial engine. There is no Baldric to be seen here. Next, we've got 1 Albion, the Shrouded Dragon. This card is so good. So before, not too long ago, I was kind of ignorant on why this card was supposed to be so good, but now, at the very least for the past couple of months, I've just been playing this card so much, and I've realized just how amazing it is, how much it does. And it's just infinitely recyclable, essentially. I never use him to fuse, because I'm always using his effect to dig for cards, sending them to the graveyard, or and then drawing at the end. So I just think that Albion is a super useful card to add. Then the next one is going to be 1 Tri-Brigade Mercurier. So this is the last piece of Albaz support specifically that I'm going to be running, at least when it comes to monsters in this deck. I don't run Kit. I was running Kit, but I found that Kit was really mostly in the way of anything. And I just found that I was drawing into cards that I didn't really need. So that's why I ended up dropping the card count. Before, I felt like 45 cards was absolutely necessary. Now I feel like I can definitely get away with 41 and do just fine. And I'm still trying to find a way to drop this to 40, but I don't see that happening. I find every card in this deck to be extremely valuable. Mercurier is a great searcher. Mostly, it's a good hand trap too, but it's mostly a great searcher, because that's mostly what I use it for. Then we've got triple Effect Veiler. So Effect Veiler is my hand trap of choice, because I find it to be just a very generic hand trap to use. Ash Blossom is still fantastic, of course, and it will definitely still hit this deck most of the time, but still, when it comes to Effect Veiler, you can hit so many cards, and the fact that you can activate this card more than once per turn is also incredibly valuable. It is a lot like Infinite Impermanence, but I like that I can use it as a fusion material in case I don't really need a Veiler at the moment, and I also like that I can banish this as fodder for summoning one of my Bestials or anything like that. So I really like Effect Veiler for that reason, because I think that Light Attribute does do a lot. Lastly, for the monsters, we've got 1 Dark Magician over here. So this is going to be pretty much my monster lineup. The Dark Magician is just here for Red Eye Stark Dragoon, obviously. And this is pretty much everything that I go with when it comes to my monster lineup. I think that it is a really solid lineup. It's not that big, but it is certainly big enough to accommodate everything that I need to get done. Now we've got the spells. So we have got triple Tactics Talents, and I like to run Talents because I think that it is a great drawing spell. That's what I like to use the effect for mostly, especially since this deck does get ashed very often, so the chances of you being able to activate Tactics are incredibly high, really. So I like to run at least 2 copies. I don't think that 3 are really going to be all that necessary. 2 is pretty great. Then we got triple Nadir Servant. So I no longer run Allure of Darkness in this build because I'm also not playing Tragedy anymore. And I just found that this is a fantastic way of searching. So Nadir Servant, I wasn't too sure about it before, but after I reread the effect that says that the restriction for being able to special summon from the extra deck is only applied after you activate this card. It means that you can still go off and do whatever you want before that, as long as this is the last card that you activate, pretty much. So I find Nadir Servant to be a great searcher. There are really 5 targets in total, 3 Albaz and 2 Quems. So I really like it a lot. I think that Nadir Servant is a great way of being able to play around Ashe as well, because there are multiple targets now that you would want to target with Ashe, if anything. And even if Branded Fusion gets Ashe, if you have Nadir Servant, you can still accomplish quite a bit. So I think Nadir Servant is really the way to go. Then I've got double fusion deployment. I really think that 2 is all that you need. I understand that you have the same amount of targets that you would for Nadir Servant, which would be 5 in total. But still, I find that with fusion deployments, I almost always end up adding Cartesia anyway. So I don't think that more than 2 is really going to be necessary. Then we have got triple branded opening. This card is even better now due to the addition of Quem, because now you can summon her and get yourself another combo starter. So opening is even better now. Usually your opponent will want to Imperm or Valor Aluber. So now in this case, this actually helps quite a bit with playing around that too. And you do get the graveyard protection as well. Then you've got triple branded fusion. This is going to be fairly obvious. No branded deck is going to run less than 3 unless it somehow ends up getting limited or anything like that. I think branded fusion is still very powerful. It's unfortunate that Ashe can stop it so easily and that Lost doesn't protect it from Ashe. But branded fusion is still the most important card in this deck. Then we've got one branded in white. I think that the ability to be able to fuse from your hand and graveyard, it's just like having a polymerization that works in both if you have a Fallen of Albaz in the graveyard. So this card is really good for being able to get into your fusion place and just being able to accomplish more. Let's say that your branded fusion got Ashe, well, you can still fuse with branded in white, if anything, as long as you have the materials available to you. Then we've got one branded in red. Red is still super useful for making Chimera and even going for some other place if you want to. Then we've got one branded in high spirits. Now this is a new addition to the deck. I think that High Spirits is also going to help us play around Ashe fairly often too, because this allows us to pretty much recover from that. So if you happen to have any Nadir Servants in your hand, you would dump an Albion, for example, to the graveyard, and then you would be able to search for this card at the end phase, and then you can set it and then activate it during your opponent's turn to be able to summon to be able to add one Fallen of Albaz to your hand, or one monster that lists it in its name. So you still get to do some searching, but you also get to dump one of your extra deck monsters to the graveyard, which will allow for some searching at the end phase too, which is super useful. So I really like it. Now you've got branded Regained. I still play Regained because I think that Regained does offer a lot of great advantage, especially on a turn-by-turn basis. Something is going to get banished. Something light or dark is going to get banished, and then you will want to use this card's effect for sure to be able to recur that. And also if you have any bestials in the graveyard and your opponent summons something, you can bring back one of those bestials, which will allow for some greater synchro plays. The last spell is going to be Branded Lost. This is a great searcher, and it should help to protect your fusions for the most part. It doesn't protect it all of the time, unfortunately. It doesn't stop the negation of effects. It only stops the negation of cards, if that makes sense. Or the activation of cards, I should say. So there's just that window where they unfortunately can still target you with Ashen. I do wish that Branded Lost could protect you from that. But with that said, next we're moving on to the trap. So we've got Etude of the Branded. This is important because if we use Branded Fusion, then we're stuck into fusions for the rest of that turn. So how would we be able to synchro? What is the most optimal time to synchro summon? It would be during your opponent's turn. So you would want to do it immediately after. So that's when you would want to set this card with Albion if you have the resources to do so. And then you would activate it during your opponent's turn to then immediately be able to synchro summon with the materials that you have on the field. It's a pretty good card, and it's also a macrocosmos in and of itself. As long as your opponent is using materials for extra deck monsters and ritual monsters, for the exception of Xyz monsters. Then you've got Branded Retribution, which is mostly used for its graveyard effect. Occasionally, I tend to resolve the first effect, which is the effect to negate a summoning of a monster, so that's pretty cool. I like it. So this is going to be my spell and trap lineup. And while some of you might actually be wondering how odd some of these options might be, or choices, I should say, believe me, this has been incredibly consistent. So now let's move on to the extra deck. So first I've got Albion the Sanctifier Dragon. So this card has been super helpful. I don't summon him every single duel, I will say, but when I do summon him, he is pretty good, and the fact that he's got 3000 attack too is quite neat. So you would be able to summon monsters to your opponent's side of the field, as long as you can summon one to your side of the field too. So you can summon something that maybe they don't need, like a Mercurier or something like that, or something that they can't really benefit too much from. But do remember, during mirror matches, this could probably end up hurting you, if anything. So you don't want to summon an Albaz to their field, for example. Maybe you want to take something else. So you do want to be careful with how you use this card, but the first effect I resolve every time I summon him. The second one is very difficult to resolve, because bringing him out by tributing 4 monsters that are specifically situated in a diamond shape is harder than it might seem. Then we've got one Grand Guignol, the Dust Dragon. So when it comes to Grand Guignol, or I believe that it is pronounced Grand Guignol or something like that. I could be wrong. Do correct me in the comments if I pronounced it correctly or incorrectly. But you mostly want him to be able to dump Lulu Lilith to the graveyard, or perhaps even an Albion if you need to, upon summoning him. But he's also pretty good for bringing out other Despia cards from the extra deck. There aren't too many options to choose from, which is why I decided to include all of them on here. So you will see that we are not going with one of my favorite lines of all time anymore, because it's just not as feasible anymore. But Grand Guignol, or Grand Guignol, is really good. And we got double Mirror Jade over here. So Mirror Jade is still a really solid card to run at 2, because you will want to recur him or her in the grind game for sure, to bring her out more than once, because of her effect to be able to banish. It's just really good by sending an extra deck monster and then being able to plus that way. Mirror Jade is just extremely solid, even to this day. Then we've got one Alba Linetus over here, the Abyss Dragon. So we only use him pretty much when it comes to sending him to the graveyard for his searching effect. And to be able to have more targets to do some banishing with Mirror Jade, or if we still wanted to do some more searching. The point is, we use him as a resource rather than an actual card that we put on the field, unless we're going up against Dragon Link or something like that, or maybe even the mirror match, if anything. But it really strongly depends. And we've got one Red-Eye Stark Dragoon. So Dragoon is still a really powerful card. You don't really go into him as often as you would before, because there's just so many lines that you can go with now. But Dragoon is an extremely solid card even to this day. Dragoon has a lot of protection, and he's got an Omni Negation effect that's just super generic. It's lovely. So I really like Red-Eye Stark Dragoon, and I will continue to run him for as long as I can, or for as long as it's feasible at least. Then you've got one Guardian Chimera. Chimera is still a super powerful card, because you can still plus with Chimera by drawing cards. I usually end up drawing 2 and then popping 1, but still you have the option of popping 2 and drawing 1 instead. I think he's quite versatile. We don't have that graveyard protection for him anymore, except for Branded Opening, but that doesn't really come up as often anymore. Guardian Chimera is still a really powerful card to bring out with Brandon and Red, so of course we're going to run him in this deck. Then we've got one Lubellion, the Searing Dragon. I only run 1 copy because I only think that 1 copy is all that we need. Even if this guy ends up getting banished by Kashtira, it really doesn't matter that much, because we're going for so many different lines. So I'm happy with 1. It just kind of means that Dragoon might not be as feasible to make or as possible to make anymore. But ultimately, this is still really good at 1, because we can make room for other cards that we need a little bit more, and we can make room for more strategies too. So I do prefer that. Then we got double Albion. It is really tough to make room for 3. We always end up using both of them. But either way, I think that at 2, this card is just really good as it is. So the effect to be able to fuse, you can use that once, and then being able to send one of them to the graveyard for that searching effect at the end phase is also really good. So that's ultimately what you would use him for, and I really think that 2 is really good enough for those purposes. Anyway, we've got one Despian Cortis. I actually brought him back because making double Masquerade just isn't so feasible in this deck anymore. So I decided that running Cortus and even Praskinian would probably be better because now we have more targets for Grand Goignal. So we would be able to bring either one of these out depending on which one we need more. If we need more attack power, then we would go for Praskinian. Or even in the mirror match, Praskinian would be better. But for Despian Cortus, he would be better against almost any other deck that isn't branded pretty much. So this would be pretty good. Double Masquerade, unfortunately, we don't really make the most out of it because almost always I end up getting Nibiru or I end up getting Lava Golem, Kaiju. They just end up getting rid of my monsters, of my poor Masquerade. So I think that these cards we would be able to just make more out of at the end of the day. Now, with that said, that's everything for the fusions that we are going to run. Next, we've got one Despian Luluwa Lilith. So when it comes to Luluwa Lilith, I have absolutely never summoned her. I've only used her for her graveyard effect. So when she's sent to the graveyard, at the end phase, you can special summon one light spellcaster monster. I believe it is like that. Yes, one light spellcaster monster from your hand or deck whose attack is equal to its own defense. So that would be either Cartesia or Quem, which is another reason why I like running two of each. Because I think that Luluwa Lilith is another great way of just being able to search for them. So yes, I like running my one copy of Luluwa Lilith, but I've never summoned her. Her on-field effect does seem pretty good, but just hasn't really come up. I've always sent her to the grave for a graveyard effect. And we got one Chaos Angel. Chaos Angel has a lot of protections offered to him, and he's very easy to make with one of the level 6 Bestials and then Cartesia or Quem. Just incredibly easy to make. And you can also even use any other level 4 monster that you already control, even if they're not a tuner, to use them as a tuner, thanks to Chaos Angel's own effects. So then you do get the abilities, for example, to make sure that all of your synchro monsters are unaffected by your monster's effects, for example, and then you can also make it so that monsters that you control cannot be destroyed by battle, depending on which materials you use to be able to bring him out. So he can just be really good, especially for the grind game, and his attack is extremely high at 3,500, so it is pretty great. Then lastly, we've got one Bestial Disbatter. This is usually what I go with when I'm summoning monsters from the extra deck. Well, when I'm synchro summoning, to be exact, because his effects to be able to negate monster effects are actually quite helpful, and you can even recycle some of your own resources by doing so, by activating his effect. So super good. I really like Disbatter or Disbater. I was pronouncing it as Disbater before, but oh well. Then we got the one OCG token that I'm still running because I still have Nibiru in my side deck. So this is everything for the extra deck over here. Now, I think that this has been extremely solid, even though I do miss Masquerade. I always miss Masquerade, but now let's move on to the side deck. We've got triple Kurikara, the Divincarnate. This card has become so much more powerful as the format has evolved. So now we have the ability to use this against so many other decks, not just Kashtira, for example. So we can definitely still use Kurikara for a lot of different plays and a lot of different strategies. So Kurikara at 3, I think that this is a must for the side deck, at the very least in this current format. Next, we've got Lightning Storm. I think that Lightning Storm is still incredibly solid, especially when it comes to Traptrix Labyrinth. You want to be able to get rid of their back row, especially if you know that you're going to go second. This is just going to be the better way to go. Then we've got triple super polymerization. This is mostly for the mirror match, because for the mirror match, we do have a lot of targets that we can use. Like if your opponent has an Aluber on the field, if they happen to have a Quem on the field, and you can super poly and then take their monsters to make some of your other Despian fusion monsters. So this is specifically for the mirror, and I don't play this pretty much anywhere else because I don't run Garura in the extra deck anymore. This is why I moved this from the main deck to the side deck. And I think that it's going to stay there for the foreseeable future, but who knows? I do like super polymerization a lot, so hopefully we can bring it back. Then we got triple Nibiru. So Nibiru is still an incredibly powerful card. A lot of decks try to play around it, which is unfortunate for you, but still, I think that Nibiru will help you out a lot with a lot of matchups. A lot of people like me do get very greedy and just assume, well, Nibiru is probably not around. So we end up playing pretty greedily into it, and we end up getting punished pretty hard. So Nibiru is going to be really good for players like me. And then we've got triple infinite impermanence. So my reasoning for this is really just that. I would probably want some additional negates depending on which decks I'm playing up against. So just having the ability to negate even more, not just using Valor, but having infinite impermanence too. I just think that having more access to that could be really nice. So I was running the Crossout package for a little bit. I never included that information in a deck profile, but I was playing it for maybe like a day or two, and I just found that there wasn't really much of a need to play Crossout, because ultimately this deck is built pretty well to be able to play around those kinds of interruptions. So I just don't think that Crossout is really that necessary anymore. It's still great to run, don't get me wrong, but I think I would rather use my deck space on other things, which is why I ended up going for this solution instead. So no Crossout package here. However, I do reserve the right to change my mind in the future. Now, with that said, thank you so much for watching this video all the way up until the very end. I do very, very much appreciate it. As this deck profile, I haven't been working on for too long since the cards are quite recent. But either way, I've been practicing with this, and I've been seeing a lot of success with it. So I think that Branded is in the best spot that it's ever been, and it is all thanks to this incredible wave of support. Now, unfortunately, I do not believe that we're going to be seeing more support for this deck anytime soon, so we are just going to have to live with what we've got for now. But what we have is really incredibly good until players learn how to play around cards like Quem a little bit better, which will happen eventually. But for now, this deck is super powerful. So thank you so much for watching this video all the way up until the very end, and I genuinely hope that this video has been informative to you. So if you did like this video, please make sure to leave a like, and I would even love to hear your comments. Maybe any suggestions that you might have, anything that I could change in the future, and even when it comes to this format. And by format, I just mean the format in which I make my videos. And hopefully you enjoyed the eye candy as well, as I will admittedly say that I like how my deck looks. Now, with that said, please subscribe for more contents as well, even Branded related. I should do a test hand for this deck at some point soon, so please make sure to stick around for that. Now, with that said, this has been Francisco, and I will be seeing you all next time. Enjoy.